Welcome to Making Sense of the Madness. We got a great show lined up for you today. We've got Nate Cain, cybersecurity expert and whistleblower, and then former chief of staff of the EPA, Mandy Gunasekara. You're not going to want to miss it. Buckle up and get ready to make sense of the madness. We are joined by Nate Cain. He is a cybersecurity veteran and a whistleblower. He's also in Deep State Gangsters. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, before we get into the film, which is based on the book by Pedro Israel Orta, who we've had on the program a couple times, why don't you give people a background, not only in your work in cybersecurity, but blowing that whistle, and why this is such an important topic that often gets overlooked?
Sure. So I met Pedro shortly after I ended up going through the Intelligence Community Whistleblower Protection Act, becoming a formal whistleblower while working as a contractor at the FBI. I've been in cybersecurity for 27 years, and I had been hired by the FBI to work on their vulnerability management system. And while I was there, I ended up overhearing a conversation that, quite honestly, I wish I had not heard, but I could not ignore it. And it was about the investigation that was going on into Hillary Clinton. And supposedly there was transcripts of a conversation that had occurred that indicated that the FBI leadership, so this would have been the people on the 7th floor, Jim Comey and others, had decided that they were going to cover up an investigation, shut down an investigation, and cover up evidence that they had been collecting on Hillary Clinton related to various crimes. And words like treason were being thrown around. Somebody said that this is so big that it could bring down the government. And I couldn't believe what I was hearing. So, of course, I had to look. I had access. I had a top secret clearance. I still do. And I was looking in the system to see if there was any truth to what I was hearing. Now, I did not find those transcripts, but what I did see was the evidence. And the FBI had 3 major field offices, the Little Rock, Arkansas field office, New York field office, and the Washington field office, all investigating Hillary Clinton for 4 major crimes. Money laundering was the majority of these cases, and there were several cases. You had securities and exchange fraud, public corruption, and terrorism financing. And these were serious crimes. These were suspicious activity reports that had come from FinCEN, so the Financial Crimes Unit. They were adjudicated already by a FBI analysts, had looked at them, had applied their notes, and had said that there was a high probability of those crimes. And they had case numbers. And so I thought at that point, well, the FBI is investigating this, so this is going to happen. So there's no, this just rumor mill about them, covering it up. And at that point, I decided that, I would just sit on it and wait. But what ended up happening was, you'll remember, not too much longer after that, there was a moment where Jim Comey came forward and held a press conference in front of the J. Edgar Hoover building. And this was over the Hillary Clinton email server. And there he basically gave their assessment of what they had found. Now, mind you, he had the tens of thousands of emails that had been deleted after a subpoena had been issued, which that in and of itself was a violation of law. I've held a clearance for, like I said, 27 years, and multiple times during that time, I've seen email requests come, in the form of subpoenas saying, "Hey, hold on to your email records," because they were investigating something. And I would never have thought at all that it would be appropriate to delete emails, but she did, and she got away with it. Then Comey went on to say that there were thousands of classified emails that were found on her server. Now, mind you, this server was a personal server that was found in her basement, in the bathroom, in her home in Chappaquiddick. This is a private email server, and she was conducting official business on it. There's only one reason why a public official would do that, and it is so that they can hide those emails, those communications from FOIA, so that you can't monitor, you cannot hold them accountable, so that there's no oversight over what's going on. And so that in and of itself was bad. But he went on to say that there were thousands of classified emails that were secret and confidential. But then he said something that caught my attention. He said that there were 7 email chains that had special access programs in them. And a special access program, for your listeners that may not understand that, is it's top secret, but it is above that in terms of compartmentalization. So these are special programs that could actually cost human lives, and in our government, or might be like information that on operatives that we have out there in the field. It also could be information that could bring grave damage to our national security apparatus. It might be information on our weapon systems and things like that. And the point is that there were 7 of these email chains. Now, let me explain.
Well,
something
let me stop you just for a second on
Sure.
the special access programs, because I think that's really important for people to really understand. Really, during World War II, when you had the Manhattan Project, you had your first massive compartmentalization program. And then post-World War II, you would set up not only black sites, but these things that were beyond the purview of the president. They're born classified, and they're on that need-to-know basis. So a lot of these special access programs have that extra layer of plausible deniability, because even the players within the government, outside of the regular bureaucracies that come with it, are basically compartmentalized and don't know the full scope of this. Now, you're telling me that 7 of these programs are going on in these email chains with varying degrees of information, and they're going out to a plethora of people, no?
Yes. And in fact, people can go back and they can pull up that that press conference, and they can see it for themselves. So the thing is that I've worked in a SCIF for most of my career, and a SCIF is a specially compartmentalized information facility. There's usually a man trap. You cannot bring any phones in there. You can't bring any recording devices, any transmitting devices. And even in those scenarios where everybody in the SCIF had a top secret clearance, there's a few times in my career where I've been read on to special access programs. When I was with Marforce Cyber, Marine Forces Cyber Command, working on a cyber protection team where we went after hackers that were hacking our national critical infrastructure. That was one of those times. And in that scenario, if I wanted to look at a special access program that I had been read on to, I would have to go to the security manager. The security manager would have to open up a safe, a GSA certified safe for holding that sort of information. They'd have to log that out. I would have to be on the list of people who were authorized to see it. And then they would have to hand carry that over to a safe room for me to review it, because I could not look at it at my desk. Even though everyone in that place had top secret clearance, they did not want somebody who did not have a need to know walking by and shoulder surfing me and seeing that information. So to get that kind of information out of a SCIF is damn near impossible unless you are willingly and knowingly violating the law and committing violations of the Espionage Act. So when he's going through this and talking, I'm thinking, oh, wow, they're getting ready to drop, a major indictment here. But then he goes on to say, but no reasonable prosecutor would bring a case against Hillary Clinton for this. And that's when I thought, whoa, something's seriously wrong here. I mean, around that same time, there was a young man who was he was put basically in prison for taking a picture of his hot rack in a submarine. And that hot rack in and of itself is nothing classified about it, but taking pictures inside the submarine is illegal without authorization. And so he got put in prison for that. And, very minor infraction to have to go to prison for, especially when Hillary Clinton had special access programs on her server and they did nothing. So at that point, this was, we're all sitting in the FBI watching this, as it's happening in real time, because we had a we had a several TVs up in there. So I'm watching this, and I hear my unit chief start cussing and swearing from his office. And so I had a pretty good relationship. And I walked over there and walked into his office. And I said, "Hey, what's going on?" And he's got it up on the TV, and he goes, "At the FBI, we do not make determinations of indictments. We only investigate." And I said to him naively, I said, "Well, are you sure that maybe they're just going light on her because they're going to bring a bigger indictment?" Because I knew about this other stuff that I had been looking at. And he goes, "No, they're going to cover this up." And so at that point, I realized I had a choice to make. I could either continue to make the most money I'd ever made at any job and turn a blind eye to it and just keep my head down and continue to do my job, or I could honor the oath that I took at least 3 times in my career to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And I decided at that point, after much prayer, I needed to do the right thing. And it was not easy. And so I went through a process of bringing this information through disclosures to the House and the Senate Intel committees. I first reached out to the House Intel Committee. This is it's the HIPSI. It's the House Intelligence Select Committee on the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, and then you have the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence. But I reached out to the House first because Devin Nunes was investigating Uranium One, and they were getting nowhere in their request to hold the FBI accountable, and they have oversight, but yet they were asking for documents and not getting those documents. And so a lot of the information that I had was specifically related to Uranium One and other money laundering activities that were going on. And so I decided to put all of those things onto, first off, I reached out to his office through an intermediary, and I had read the law. The law made it clear that I could turn over classified documents only to a few different people. And one of those was to senior staffers of the Intel committees. They all had the types of clearances necessary and required to take a whistleblower complaint. So I reached out to Devin Nunes through an intermediary. We set up a meeting. I handed over these documents. I briefed him, on what was on the thumb drive that I brought out. And he ended up asking me if I would go back in and get more information, because there was an intelligence report in particular that they needed, which would show the dates of when the FBI knew that that Rosatom, that Russian energy company that wanted to buy Uranium One, they had heard that there was a document that would show that the FBI knew more than what they were telling and allowing this thing to go forward through the CFIUS committee, which is the Committee on Foreign Investment in the U.S. It's a committee that rules on whether or not certain purchases can happen outside the United States when it may have a national security impact. And so I went and I looked for this document that they were asking for, and I found it. I found an intelligence report that showed not only did the FBI know that Rosatom was in fact, a company that was working as an operative for Russian intelligence. They had evidence that this company was involved in a bribery kickback scheme in order to attempt to infiltrate our uranium supply chain. But they knew this before the CFIUS committee signed off on allowing Rosatom to purchase Uranium One. And of course, in that they gained a large holdings in a company that processed our uranium supply, which was, was basically done in Canada. And Hillary Clinton was the chairman of the CFIUS committee while Secretary of State during that time. So I took all these documents, I brought them. Now I had gone back in, I got this other document, and I got cut off from communications. So now I had to reach out to a lawyer. And so I hired an attorney to help me go through the process of getting it to both the House and the Senate Intel committees via the Inspector General for the DOJ, which was Michael Horowitz.
Nate, let me stop you. So you're telling me that Nunes and his people tell you to go in there, get this documentation, and then completely abandon you after the fact?
Yes.
I mean, this is why I hate both parties, my friend. You know, there are so many people that are invested in this idea that, you know, one side is going to save you. The Republicans are better than the Democrats. But at the end of the day, not only did you provide vital information from the outset, but you were asked to go above and beyond. And you have to wonder if, you know, after the fact, when you did that, if there wasn't an element of some type of setup right then and there that maybe didn't come to fruition. Go ahead. I'd love to get your take.
Yeah, I can only speculate as to what happened, but I have a pretty good idea of what happened. There was a podcast that came out with Lee Smith, I think, was interviewing Devin Nunes. This was a few years later. And in that interview, he was talking about a period of time that was specifically the week that I came out with that information for them. And he was talking about an incident that occurred with him and Trey Gowdy, where they were asked by the FBI to come down and look at some documents in the SCIF at the FBI. And they were given a warning by somebody that they were going to be set up and that the FBI was going to leak that information, to the press, and then they would be blamed for it. So they confirmed that they were going to come down to the SCIF, but then they never showed. And sure enough, it got leaked and they got blamed, but then they were able to prove that they were never at the SCIF. They never saw it. And I think that spooked them. And one of the things that had occurred with the senior staffer to Devin Nunes was when I had gotten in the car and introduced myself, he didn't want to know my name. I offered to show him my badge at the FBI. He said, "No, I don't want to see your badge. I don't want to. It's better if I don't know you." And he also told me something that was very disturbing. When I asked him, "How do you want me to contact you?" He gave me an encrypted. I said, "Do you want me to call you?" And he said, "No." He says, he says, "We're quite certain that we're being surveilled by the FBI." Now think about that for a minute. This is the congressional committee that has oversight over the FBI's intelligence operations, and they believed that they were being spied on by the FBI. And it turns out they were right. There was evidence that came out later, at least Chuck Grassley had put this out on the Senate Judiciary Committee, that the CIA in particular was spying on both committees in order to identify whistleblowers. So he gave me an encrypted tool in order to be able to reach out to him. But when I reached out with that tool later, that's when I got no response. And so I ended up going through this process. It was a lengthy process. It took a year for me to get through it completely. And 4 months after I completed my disclosure, I got raided by the FBI. And then what ensued after that was a 2-year period of time of just trial with my family and being put through the ringer. I lost my job at the VA.
Let's stop it right there, because I want to flesh that process out. Here
Yeah.
you are, again, giving up the financial opportunity of a lifetime. Okay, damn well know you're risking it. You're in this world where I don't know. I guess you're a veteran in cybersecurity. I would love to get your take if you ever thought it would get into this realm, given what you had seen through documentation and otherwise. But now you're very much in the mix of it, and you would think you're going through the avenues that are provided to you in what was a constitutional republic. But unfortunately, you're finding it's anything but that. We're going to take that break. We're going to come back. Nate Cain is our guest. More Making Sense of the Madness after this.
The Donor Deck represents a groundbreaking independent crowdfunding initiative driven by patriots like you to bring back our esteemed President Donald J. Trump to office. With unwavering passion, we pledge all profits from the sale to MAGA Inc. and Fight Like a Flynn PAC. The exquisitely detailed challenge coin is a timeless collectible to be passed down to generations. It symbolizes your continuous dedication to assisting President Trump in his quest to rejuvenate America to its former greatness. Get your donor deck now. Go to thepatriot.tv store and click on Donor Deck. Enjoy the magnificent artwork and scripture on each playing card, knowing our appreciation for your continuous dedication to assisting President Trump in his quest to rejuvenate America to its former greatness. You'll get this keepsake collectible challenge coin acknowledging your support for Donald Trump's run back to the White House, and the donor deck of 52 exquisite playing cards, plus a beautiful display case to show your challenge coin. Go to thepatriot.tv store and get your donor deck now. Attention business owners, are you ready to advertise to millions of loyal patriots ready to buy your products or services? Here is your golden chance to advertise with Jason Bermas and connect with his massive audience on Patriot TV and his incredibly loyal social media followers. As an advertiser on Making Sense of the Madness, you also reach his followers on the top social media sites. As Jason dives into complex current events and conspiracies, offering investigative analysis and thought-provoking discussions to uncover the deeper truths behind the headlines. When you advertise with Jason on Making Sense of the Madness, you're aligning your brand with integrity, loyalty, and a dedication to truth. Jason's audience is passionate, conservative, and committed to the values your business stands for. When given the choice, Jason's followers will buy your products or services over other woke companies. Don't miss this opportunity to elevate your brand with the power of Patriot TV. Reach out to us today at advertise@patriot.tv.
And we are back. So we're at a point now. I don't want to just, fast forward through, this persecution, because I think it's really important. Again, you've exhausted how many avenues. You lawyer up immediately after that takes place. First and foremost, given your career choice, did you ever think it would come to this? And if so, never. It never even crossed your mind, even with all the corruption over the years. Because you're 20+ year veteran in this field, right? In Washington.
Most of my career though was working for the military. I worked with the Navy for a very long time. I worked with the Army. I was an Army veteran myself, and then I also worked with the Marine Corps and a few other agencies like DISA and, like I said, NSA for a little bit. But I always knew that there was corruption. I've seen some corruption even in those agencies as well. But most of the corruption that had to do with like illegally awarded contracts and stuff like that. Nothing on a national security level like this, where you had, one of the charges was terrorism financing. You had money going out of the Clinton Foundation being funneled through shell corporations, shell bank accounts, and into the account of the head spokesman for the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt. That's what was going on a monthly basis. And that was happening out of the Clinton Foundation. There was money going into her foundation coming from all these different countries that many of them were on the list of countries that we're not allowed to do business with because these are illegal, corrupt dictatorships and things like that. But the money was being funneled through other charities and eventually making its way into her foundation. So I never expected, to be caught up in the middle of all of this. And in fact, when I went to the FBI, I was quite proud of being selected. It was a grueling interview. I think they'd interviewed 14 people ahead of me, and to even get an interview and then to pass that interview was quite an honor. And I have had a long-standing family members that have been in law enforcement, and so I've had a respect for law enforcement my whole life. But what I saw from day one in the FBI was a politicization of that agency. And I've worked for other federal law enforcement agencies as well. And I have not seen that kind of politicization that I saw at the FBI. That was unique. The FBI, where I was working, there was just a hatred of Donald Trump by people, that I worked with. And I didn't make any bones about it. I just figured, whatever, people have their own opinions. That's what makes America great, is that we can vote how we feel. But I didn't realize that they took things to the level of making their decisions in terms of prosecutions, and making their decisions in terms of who to go after, and making their decisions in terms of who to surveil on the basis of their political party. And that is exactly what I saw, and came out, of course, with the exposure of Operation Crossfire Hurricane. So I believe that Crossfire Hurricane, I believe, was specifically designed to keep Donald Trump out of the FBI. They had to keep him busy and keep him out of the FBI because of what they had already covered up. They had to cover up their cover up. And I think that's what it was all about.
Well, let me just stop you right there because,
Sure.
A lot of people focus in on the Hunter Biden laptop, for instance. Everybody forgets about the Anthony Weiner laptop that the FBI had and never looked at. And obviously local NYPD looked at that. One of the reasons I want to intertwine that is this is the same time period where Weiner's wife, Huma Abedin, is the right-hand woman, if you will, to Hillary Clinton. It was publicly put out there. All of her emails were accessible through that laptop. And I want to remind people that the only reason Weiner, who's got his own talk show, did a little time in a country club, even got prosecuted for his behavior with underage girls, wasn't any evidence on that laptop. It was because the girl who was 15 at the time that he was Skyping with had that information on her PC. And she went to the authorities with that. Now, I want that to sink in for people because obviously, if she's got that info, they could have scraped some of that information on Weiner's laptop alone. The federales never got involved in that case. And that's something, that was disappointing to me, quite frankly, with Trump, is that he didn't even go that avenue and look into that laptop and these other crimes. But you're saying one of the reasons is to kind of keep him away from the FBI altogether.
Yes. And in fact, it's interesting, you mentioned that laptop because I don't talk about it very much, but the unit that I worked for had two parts. We did the vulnerability management, but we also we had the penetration testing team. And so we had special tools on our laptops that would allow us to do things that other computers in the FBI couldn't do. That's one of the reasons why I was able to put my information onto a thumb drive and get it out of the FBI that way. I didn't want to print it because I knew that they would be looking at logs for printing, and it wasn't that I had anything to hide, but I needed time to be able to get this information to the right places. And I knew that, if I had to go through official channels, they would have stopped it. Now, one of the things that happened right around the same time as all of this was there was one of our special laptops that went missing from our unit. And it was loaned out, interestingly enough, to the New York field office. And I remember they were using it in some investigation up in New York, and literally right around the exact same time that laptop went missing. And then when my boss, my federal supervisor, who was in charge of all those laptops, it was, he had it on his property receipt. He tried to get that laptop back and it had gone missing, and he was held responsible for it. And he had to end up, getting, I think, suspended or something like that for it, even though it wasn't his fault. Somebody basically disappeared that laptop. And I think it was the laptop that was used in that investigation based on what limited information that I had. But, these kinds of things.
So let me just stop because that's a huge story. Yeah. Now, first of all, we don't know where the Weiner laptop is. Again, when you look at the Biden laptop, a lot of people before it got into the public arena had copies of those hard drives. Okay, so it was a little harder to cover up. But again, some of that stuff gets into the public arena. Some of it may be legal. Otherwise, you're talking about when we're talking about special software, I would assume it's ultra recovery. And being somebody who does recovery software, I am quite the geek myself, sir. Probably not in your arena, but
imaging software, recovery software, password breaking software, all of that kind of stuff, and more. But yeah, the purpose of what the laptop was released for was for imaging another laptop that was in being involved in an investigation. And like I said, it disappeared. We never got it back.
And that's incredible. Forget about the Weiner laptop, the laptop they used to investigate it, folks, which honestly, again, because of these special tools, would have even more information than that laptop in the hands of, say, a local law enforcement. I think that's
right.
really something people have to understand. So let's move on a little bit.
Sure.
Obviously, this film is out there. You took part in it. Why did you take part in this film, and how do you relate to other whistleblowers that are also featured in this?
So there's something unique. Whistleblowing it takes whistleblowing takes a lot of courage to do, because, like you said, you're going to give up your career. You're definitely going to have retaliation. I don't care what anybody tells you. There is retaliation every time, and I knew that going into it. But part of the reason why it's extremely important that the whistleblowers that are in this film, we are all part of the intelligence community. You've got John Curico and Pedro Izarorta, who both worked for the CIA. You have myself and Garrett Boyle, who worked for the FBI. And in any other situation, a whistleblower can take information and can go to the press. But when it comes to classified information, or when it comes to revealing things from within the intelligence community, it is extremely dangerous. Not just dangerous to your career, but dangerous to your freedom, because one misstep and you're going to jail, as what happened with John Curico. He actually did time in prison. The fact is, though, nobody, because of the classification, nobody knows what goes on in these agencies unless a whistleblower comes forward and brings it out in the open. Unless a whistleblower is willing to put his life at risk, put his career at risk, and all of that to do the right thing, nobody in America would ever know about these things because of how classified. If you were to submit a FOIA request to the FBI or to the CIA or the NSA or any of the other intelligence agencies, all you would get back is a document that has nothing but black lines across the page. And that is because they can just redact information and you won't know what's going on. And so whistleblowers play an extremely important role when it comes to exposing wrongdoing within our federal agencies that are in the intelligence community. And so that's one of the reasons why I agreed to be a part of this documentary, is I wanted to express to people how important it is and how dangerous it is too. Because in my case, the FBI, when they raided my home, they leaked my name to the New York Times. I had anonymity, but their leaking my name ended up forcing me to out myself. And I was dealing with not just Hillary Clinton and her crew, senior leadership at the FBI, but also Russian intelligence agents. And I ended up getting poisoned twice. And I had my lug nuts on my vehicle loosened right before a long trip that we made down to Kentucky. I had surveillance being done on me for at least 2 years. That I know for a fact. Illegally, by the way. And when the Daily Caller did a FOIA request to the U.S. magistrate who signed off on the search warrant for my home, they did a FOIA request asking the judge a simple question. Was the judge notified that I was a protected whistleblower under the Intelligence Community Whistleblower Protection Act? And a Clinton-appointed judge, federal judge, put a seal on that answer, and then she sealed her justification for putting a seal on that answer. It doesn't get more corrupt than that.
It absolutely doesn't. Nate, we have run out of time. Let everybody know how they can support your work, check out your show, and obviously go check out Deep State Gangsters.
Sure. So I'll start with the documentary look, folks. It's coming out here, I think, in the next week, and it is going to be. You can find it by going to deepstategangsters.com. I highly recommend that you guys take a look at this. I think you're going to find it very enlightening as to what's been going on inside the intelligence community, in particular, the retaliation that has happened against whistleblowers. Folks, you can also find me on pretty much all social media at Nate Cain for WV. And I'd be honored if you'd go on there and follow me. I talk about a lot of these different things, but I also have a show, theraisingcainshow.com, and I do a regular 3 or 4 days a week podcast, and you guys can find all my shows, and I also do a couple of talk radio things as well, and you can find all of those shows at my website, theraisingcainshow.com.
All right, Nate, thank you so much. We're going to take a quick break, and we got more Making Sense of the Madness after this.
Former National Security Advisor Lieutenant General Michael Flynn pleaded guilty today to lying to the FBI.
He was one of the most respected generals in the military.
Every American needs this historical DVD keepsake. Flynn delivered the truth, whatever the cost. Hand signed by General Michael Flynn. Order now at the Patriot TV store. Use promo code PTV at checkout to get special savings. The Patriot TV store, a secure, hassle-free shopping experience.
The world is about to shift. Banks are going cashless globally with the emergence of central bank digital currency, which will bring with it programmable money and the ability to turn on or off your purchasing power based on your digital social profile. It's like the equivalent of spyware in your bank account. You need to get out of the system with the world's safest and most precious assets, silver and gold. Call Kirk Elliott Precious Metals at 720-605-3900. That's 720-605-3900.
And we are now joined by Mandy Gunasekara, and she is a former chief of staff over at the EPA. She's got a new book out there. Thank you so much for joining us. Before we get into Y'all Fired, how does one get involved in the Environmental Protection Agency?
Jason, it's great to be with you. And that's a really great question. Really, it started out with my very first internship in Washington, D.C. That led to another one. And I ended up working during the summer of cap and trade. This is back in 2009 when Democrats were in charge of the House and the Senate, and they were really trying to put a price on carbon. Obviously, the American people were pushing back, and I was the intern/research assistant that was in charge of digging into some of the environmental policy and the emissions profiles of various sources, meaning factories, cars, and things along those lines. So that experience really set the stage for what eventually became a policy expertise and oversight of the Obama administration during 2015 and 2016 when I became counsel on the U.S. Senate Environment and Public Works Committee. And then when President Trump won the election and they were looking for a climate and an air girl, I had the perfect resume to really jump in and help define those two issues for President Trump.
So your expertise spans many administrations. Again, before we get into the book, and I'm sure you probably cover this in the book because I know this is a journey, what are some of the differences that you found in each administration? And what are some of the maybe unexpected obstacles of your position?
Yeah, I think I was much lower level during the Bush administration. I actually served as an intern in the White House, but knowing what I know now is that the Bush administration really was this faction of Republicans that is willing to go along to get along. It's totally different under President Trump, but under President Bush, H.W. Bush, that is, sorry, W. The approach to climate and environmental policy and the role of the bureaucrat was really deferential. And I don't think they fully understood how activists could take hold of these ideas where there is commonality, but then use them to either keep themselves in power or suppress those who think differently, which eventually is what we ran up into during the Trump administration. Now, during the Obama administration, I was working for conservatives in the Senate. The Obama administration fully embraced this. The reality of federal agencies is they are a tool of progressivism. So if you are a Democrat and you believe in this leftist approach to governance, well, then the federal agencies are going to do your bidding. And we saw this on full display during the Obama administration and then again during the Biden administration. So that happened. You saw the proliferation of regulations the use of climate change and the environment as a tool to generate fear and affiliated fear-based action so that the American people were willing to accept policies that may limit individual freedoms, add costs to their daily lives. But hey, if you're doing it to save the planet, then people are more willing to go along with it. So that's what we saw during the Obama administration, during the Trump administration. And this is where I was in a position to really have an impact on the policy direction. It was getting the federal government out of the way, because the reality is the growth of the federal government means the diminishment of the American voter and the American individual. And so that suppressed economic development, that suppressed the ability of people to start businesses. And so President Trump made very clear our mandate at EPA was to protect the air, clean up the water, clean up legacy pollution, continue to improve industrial efficiencies, but get red tape out of the way so that American enterprise and innovation could actually take off and flourish. And we did that. We did that pretty well up until Team Biden came in and they reinstituted what we saw during Team Obama, which again is using the tool of the progressive left, which is the administrative state, to grow the federal government into every facet of American life.
Now, you just kind of mentioned the idea of ideologues and people that were true believers. How many of those did you come across over the years, and how many of those were really fronts?
Yeah, I came across many. I'll say when I came across them in the Senate, it was actually easier because everyone knows what team you're playing for. If you work for a Democrat senator or you're part of a Democrat committee, well, you know where they stand. Going into the administration, you're walking into a room where you have no idea who is actually a public servant as they're supposed to be, so neutral to ideological factors, or who is just a political activist that's trying to undermine what our directive was using all the tools that they've been working on for often over decades. So those folks were the worst case situation. And I had to deal with them just about every single day that I walked in working for President Trump. And that's really how I start out the book, is giving a picture. It's an anecdotal experience, but a picture of what that looked like. And it manifested itself in the form of sexist bullying by the deep state when me and one other female colleague went to Paris. This is after the president withdrew the United States from the Paris Climate Accord because it was a bad deal for the United States, causing economic harm to many industries, but also undermining American worker opportunities. He withdrew from that disastrous deal. I was heavily involved, and I was charged with going and trying to renegotiate something better. And our lodging was set up by members of the embassy, and they ended up putting us in this sex hotel. So I'm going there on behalf of the president. And I'd been on these international conferences. I knew what to expect. This was an instance where everything that could go wrong went wrong. And then we ended up housed about 30 to 45 minutes away from the actual conference in a sex hotel. And this was, again, the deep state not only trying to undermine President Trump's work, but trying to send a message to myself and my fellow female colleague that they did not respect us and they were going to make our life a living hell.
But wait a minute, I thought that Trump is the big sexist. I thought we have to be worried about him. Just to be clear, this was not a common practice of Trump putting you up in sex hotels as you traveled the country and the world on behalf of the EPA. No, that wasn't it.
No, Jason. President Trump gave me the opportunity of lifetime and his full faith and support to go do a job. It was the deep state that was putting me in sex hotels and trying to degrade my presence at an international conference where I was there to do a very serious job.
So then let's start getting into the book. When did you decide to write this book? How do you kick it off? What is the process of putting something like this out?
Yeah, so it was actually my husband. He obviously was on the receiving end of everything I had to deal with. He also served in the Trump administration. He served over at U.S. Customs and Border Patrol, built more miles of wall than has ever been done before. But he heard me when I would come home and talk about what I was dealing with from my more technical role when I first served to my role as chief of staff. that I started the day the federal government shut down because of COVID. This was March 16th, 2020. So it really was unfortunate, but one of a kind experience where the complexities of work were that much more difficult. So he heard all this, and at the end of the administration, we had a couple creative projects we wanted to work on, and he said, you know, you should really sit down and start thinking about writing a book. And so first it was a conversation, and then we got serious and we started outlining it, and then started building out the book that it is today.
So obviously, Trump trying to go in for a second administration right now. Book probably couldn't be a more prescient time. What are your thoughts on this run? Because if you look at 2016 to now 2024, these last three presidential election cycles have been the most bizarro world, maybe even in our history. You didn't think you could top 2020. Here we are in 2024, where the guy that they installed, who was a complete puppet the entire time, gets tossed out after a debate. There was no democratic process in the primaries. They pushed RFK Jr. all the way out, so there would be no real competition. And they certainly didn't want him to do what Trump did to the Republican Party. We have 2 assassination attempts on the former president. I'm banking on a third at this point. When you're looking at all this, being someone who was formerly in the administration and maybe would like to be in the next one, what's running through your head?
Yeah, the time for radical reform is here and now. And that's what this book really is about. The administrative state, it needs to go. It needs to be shrunk by at least 50, if not 40%. Because if you look at all of these things that have happened, all of these problems, it really is the left using the power of various federal agencies, whether it's the FBI and DOJ, and using their power of enforcement and investigation. They're shifting that to go after the political opponent of the left, that is President Trump, and all of the consequences that have stemmed from that. You look at the SEC and our bank regulatory oversight entities, instead of trying to work towards stabilizing markets and making it easier for people who have good ideas to lend money and take that money and turn it into something tangible, they're using it to shut down conservative entities and industries from being able to proliferate and create community-based flourishing. And then you look at places like the EPA. The mission is to protect public health and the environment. It's not to pick winners and losers between how our energy producers extract, refine, or deliver the resources we need to live modern life. Yet that is exactly what they are doing. These agencies have been taken over, and instead of fulfilling important missions that Congress actually gave them the authority to implement, they are using it as a political weapon to suppress the conservative movement and trying to keep the leftists in power. So the time for radical reform is here and now, and we have to all have courage. President Trump has courage, and a lot of the people around him do, but collectively, we've obviously got to get over the hump of the election. But if we get that opportunity from the American people, we cannot waste time, and we've got to get to work with serious reform that's going to ruffle a lot of feathers, but you just can't care, because this is the time to literally reinstitute our Constitution as we know it. Otherwise, we're going to continue down this path of progressivism that really is totally counter to so many of the founding principles that were really important from the start.
Well, I would argue, as we once knew it, we haven't had a real constitutional republic for a long time. The book is Y'all Fired, A Southern Belle's Guide to Restoring Federalism and Draining the Swamp. We're going to take a quick break, final segment of the show after this.
Don't let them win. Patriot TV is committed to delivering the truth. America's new network for patriots is growing fast, and we'd love you to join us as a member of Patriot TV. Your support makes it possible for us to continue to deliver unbiased reporting, thought-provoking discussions, and insights you won't find anywhere else. From in-depth interviews to behind-the-scenes footage, Patriot TV brings you closer to the voices shaping our nation's future. Whether it's political developments, cultural shifts, or global affairs, Patriot TV keeps you informed and empowered. As a member of Patriot TV, you'll get perks like personal invitations to exclusive Patriot TV events, where you can gather and network with like-minded Americans. We'll also host online events throughout the year with General Flynn, who's committed to host live Q&A webinars where callers like you can ask him questions and get real answers. Access to these events will be members only, so go to patriot.tv, click on Become a Member. It's fast and easy. We have a great membership option starting at just $9.99 a month, or save with our annual membership for only $99, or take advantage of the best value, the 2-year membership for just $159. Go to patriot.tv, click on Become a Member. It's fast and easy. Do your part to make sure the truth gets out to all patriots and help ensure future programming. Become a member today. Just go to patriot.tv, click on Become a Member, join today.
We are back. Mandy, when you wrote this book, what was the most surprising thing that you ended up putting on paper? Because I would imagine you kind of have to edit some moments out. maybe the spiciest thing doesn't go in there, but what did you put in there that you thought maybe was a little risque or something you didn't expect to put in the book?
Well, I never thought I would be writing on a piece of paper my experience at a sex hotel. I mean, I really didn't. It's incendiary, but it's unbelievable. But it actually did happen. So really going through and working through that, it did create trauma. It created trauma for me and my fellow colleague. I actually was in DC a couple weeks ago and sat down with her, and we just couldn't believe, now that we're past it, everything that we went through and how rude and absurd. And the reality, I think this is it, Jason, the reality that we had a very clear picture that the left doesn't see us as humans. They see us as political opponents. And the more people realize that, the more they will realize how serious our elections are and how serious the work ahead is to, again, as you aptly put it, reinstitute the constitutional republic that we once knew and haven't seen for quite some time. And the culprit in moving away from this is the growth and the relevance of the unaccountable, unelected bureaucrat.
So you mentioned cutting the government in 50%, 40%. One of the things I really liked about Ramaswamy was talking about on day one, just firing half of the people indiscriminately by their social security number. I understand you're going to get rid of a lot of good people, but you're going to get rid of a lot of bad people, and you're going to expose the system for what it is. It's overbloated. It's unnecessary. It needs to be even further regulated, I would argue, than that. I would love to see that type of policy instituted via Trump and put Ramaswamy as the head of something that would oversee that. I mean, call me crazy, but those are the type, you're talking about drastic action. That I don't think that's necessarily a very drastic action, especially given what we've seen from the administrative state, not just in the last 4 years, but over the last couple of decades, especially in light of the war on terror, if you will, even being back in the Bush administration. The Homeland Security, what's it really doing? You know, they argued it was going to be for terrorists overseas. Now the terrorists are over here. And if you look at the border issue, look, Border Patrol was imperfect prior to Homeland Security. It has only gotten gradually more disastrous under that administration. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, there could be a day one executive order asking everyone who goes in to basically filter existing jobs through agencies what are actually tangible to fulfilling the administration's mission, and what do they have the legal authority to do from Congress, and what doesn't. And everything that's in the category that doesn't, those people need to go. And the president has the power to do that. Everyone who works in the executive branch serves at the pleasure of the President of the United States. We, as conservatives, though, haven't had an executive willing to come in and actually flex that power. But I believe President Trump understands that now, and he's got people like Vivek Ramaswamy, he's got people like Elon Musk, he's got people like myself who have seen it, experienced it, and have the ideas and the backing to help actually make that happen and right-size the federal government once and for all.
I'd like to see somebody like a Thomas Massey in there. He's a political realist. I'm not in love with either side. I've been politically homeless for decades at this point, to be quite frank with you. And, Massey really did put it out there, especially about the budget and the SAVE Act. He's like, this is all theater. He's like, we should have had a dozen bills to vote on. We're going to get this omnibus bill. We might get it before Christmas, might get it after. The SAVE Act's on there. It's not going to be part of the end of the bill. He's like, I get it. We're going to have a bunch of Democrats openly vote to have illegals vote in our elections, and we need to put that out there and have that theater. But at the end of the day, it's not even going to matter because it's not going to be there. I think you need that type of political realism and dedication because there's a guy that I haven't seen bend to any agenda outside of quote-unquote America First, left or right, in my opinion, in his entire career.
Yeah, that's right. We need Congress to actually do their job, which there is a regular order that needs to occur, especially when you're talking about the budget. And the problem of the growth of the federal bureaucracy is you have Congress that has been willing to rubber stamp. They wait till the very end, the last minute, and then they essentially rubber stamp the last cycle's funding mechanisms with maybe a little bit more here or there at various agencies. So we're on this path of constant growth in terms of the amount of federal resources allocated to these federal agencies. What you need is more of members of Congress in the House and the Senate that do not care about the business of Washington, D.C., but they care about the business of the people they represent back home and the states. And if they do, then they will shrink the size of the budget, which will then shrink the size of the federal agencies and begin to reestablish the balance between the role of the state and the federal government. But you need people who don't care about the business of DC, and you really have to work on breaking the progressive stranglehold that is Washington, DC, that is also a part of this unabated growth. You think about Washington, D.C., it's 95+% Democrat. And a lot of these people are the federal workers. They're all a part of these quote unquote government unions. And 96% of all government union resources go to supporting Democrats. And Jason, I was just in DC last week. I was testifying before the House Oversight and Government Accountability Committee. And I talked about Schedule F and firing civil servants that don't actually do their job. And that was the one thing that really triggered the Democrats. And so it made very clear to me they care about protecting the federal bureaucrat, AKA the Democrat donor, than they do about the interests of the American people. So if we want Congress to do their job, we need members of Congress in the House and the Senate that remember who they represent and do not care about the business of Washington, D.C. And then we can get onto this road of much needed reform.
Mandy, I know the book drops at the beginning of the month. People can pre-order it at Amazon. What would you like to leave the audience with?
I would just say, please check it out. Have an open mind and know that we're talking about very serious problems. But the good news is we still have the gift that our founders gave us, which is the process by which we can fight back. And it's not too late. So please pre-order my book, read it. I'd love for the feedback and know that we can fix this problem with the right people in place. And I really feel like the right people have come to the forefront when we need them most.
Mandy, thank you so much. And that is it for today's show, everybody. You know the drill. It's not about left or right. It is always about right and wrong. Check us out 5 days a week at 5 p.m. Eastern Time at patriot.tv. I love you guys. We'll see you on the flip side.